Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. This is a compressed structural companion to the deep dive on Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter by Tom Bissell. This is not a summary, this is not advice. So just to be clear, we're not doing a book review here. Instead, we're going to use this book as a lens, really as a tool to deconstruct the entire video game industry. We want to see it for what it is, a massive, powerful system that's all about shaping our attention and creating meaning.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll figure out what the system even is. Then, we'll look at the incentives that make it go, how it actually produces the games we play, why it's stuck around for so long, and finally, how it connects to, well, everything else. Okay, first up, the interactive system. To really get this, we've got to ask a pretty basic question, right? What is a video game at its core? I mean, beyond just being a shooter or an RPG. And this quote from Chris Dallin really hits the nail on the head. It's a total perspective shift. See, games aren't really like movies where you just sit back and watch a story unfold. No, they're systems. They're a collection of rules and pieces that are specifically designed for you to interact with. And this idea leads to this really fascinating tension. So on one side, you've got the framed narrative. That's the story the game tells you. You know, in all those cutscenes, you just watch. But then on the other side, there's the Ludo narrative, and Ludo is just Latin for play. This is the story you make by, well, playing the game. And here's the kicker. These two things are often at odds. They're pulling in opposite directions, and that's a central puzzle that designers are constantly trying to figure out. All right, next section, the logic of incentives. So if these are interactive systems, what's the fuel? What actually makes this whole engine run? Well, it's a whole bunch of things pushing and pulling at once. Of course, you've got monetization. These games cost a fortune, and you have to make that money back. Then there's engagement, keeping you playing for as long as possible. There's also this constant push for technological novelty, better graphics, new hardware. And yeah, prestige matters. The industry wants to be seen as a real art form. But honestly, the biggest one? A deep fear of commercial failure. Risk aversion.
And that fear isn't just, an idea. It's very, very real. Take a look at this number, $750 million. That's the loss a single publisher reported in just 1 year. When the stakes are that high, when failure can cost you $750 million, well, that creates one heck of an incentive to just play it safe and stick with what's already proven to work.
And this quote from game designer Stanya Haidt just sums it all up perfectly. Why do we see so many military shooters? It's not a mystery. It's because the system knows they can sell. When you're dealing with that kind of financial pressure, the safe bet almost always wins out over the risky creative one. Which brings us to our next question. How are these outcomes actually produced? How do those incentives translate into the games we end up playing? It turns out the process isn't really like an artist painting a masterpiece. It's something else.
Yeah, a really good way to think about it is as a kind of feedback-driven laboratory. Seriously, in this lab, the players, well, we're not just the customers, we're the test subjects. We're part of these endless, rapid-fire experiments, all designed to make the experience as optimized as possible. And the book gives us this incredible peek inside that lab. You have a famous designer, Cliff Bleszinski, watching a playtest for Gears of War 2 and just barking out orders. Enough monster foreplay. Make the characters move 10 to 15% faster. It's all about tiny tweaks in real time to remove any hint of boredom and just crank up the fun factor. And this creates this constant cycle. You play test, you find the friction, the boring parts, the frustrating bits. You tweak the system, maybe make things faster or add more rewards, and then you test it again. Immediately. It's a super effective process for creating these highly polished, even addictive feedback loops. But there's a cost, right? Anything that's a bit slow or complicated or, narratively complex, it tends to get smoothed over, sanded away, all in the name of creating that perfectly frictionless fun. Okay, so we see how the sausage gets made. But why is this system so durable? How did it become such a massive, unshakable part of our culture? Well, a big part of it is just how much it's grown. I mean, think about it. In the 80s, it was a hobby for burrito-fueled grad school dropouts. By the 2000s, it was a business with hemispherical influence. And now, we're seeing what you could call generational normalization. The next wave of political leaders, of CEOs, they didn't just hear about video games. They grew up playing them. It's completely normal, a built-in part of their world.
And that leads to another huge reason this system persists. It's not about individuals anymore. You can't make a modern blockbuster game in your garage. It takes guilds, these huge, specialized teams with skills in everything from architecture and physics to music and cinematography. It's an industrialized process, and that kind of machinery is really, really hard to turn or change direction quickly.
So for our last section, let's pull the camera back. Let's talk about interconnection. How does this massive, self-perpetuating system plug into the wider world, specifically the attention economy? And that really brings us to the core question, doesn't it? What happens when a system that was born out of the idea of play becomes a central pillar of the modern attention economy? Because let's be honest, that's what we're talking about here. These are some of the most powerful tools for capturing our attention that have ever existed.
And this is where we run into a real problem. It creates what you might call a crisis in perception. See, most of us still think about games in terms of, fun and play. It's a nostalgic view. But that view is becoming totally disconnected from their actual function today, which is to operate as a multi-billion-dollar machine for capturing attention. That gap, that disconnect between what we think they are and what they do, that's the crisis.
So when you look at the whole structure, the financial incentives, that laboratory-style feedback loop, the sheer industrial scale of it all, you start to see the system's logic pretty clearly. And it leaves us with one last, really pointed question, pulled right from the source material. What is the ultimate goal of a system that's designed to be a vivid and continuous dream that you never, ever want to leave? Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoyed this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.